The year is 2025. Donald Trump, defying all expectations and riding a wave of populist anger, has secured a second term as President of the United States. While his supporters celebrated, the global financial markets reacted with a shudder, a tremor that quickly escalated into a full-blown earthquake. Within days of Trump's victory, stock markets worldwide plunged, wiping trillions of dollars off the value of companies large and small. This wasn't just a blip, a temporary dip in the markets. This was a full-blown crisis, a direct result of the policies Trump had championed and the uncertainty they injected into the global economy. The seeds of this economic chaos were sown during Trump's first term, characterized by his America First rhetoric and aggressive trade policies. His re-election signaled a doubling down on these policies, a reality that sent shockwaves through the interconnected global economy. As investors digested the implications of 4 more years of Trump, fear and uncertainty gripped the markets. The very foundations of the global financial system, built on decades of relative stability and predictable policies, seemed to crumble. This was not the Wall Street boom Trump had promised. It was a market meltdown of epic proportions. The speed and severity of the market decline were staggering. Major indices like the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the tech-heavy Nasdaq plummeted, recording double-digit percentage drops in a matter of days. The S&P 500, a broad measure of the U.S. stock market, wasn't spared either, shedding trillions of dollars in market capitalization. This wasn't just a case of investors getting cold feet, it was a full-blown panic, fueled by the realization that Trump's re-election meant the trade wars, protectionist policies, and economic uncertainty of his first term were here to stay. This was not the roaring comeback Trump had promised. It was an economic earthquake that left the global financial system teetering on the brink. Central to Trump's economic agenda were his aggressive trade policies, a cornerstone of his America First platform. He believed that by slapping hefty tariffs on imports, particularly from China, he could protect American jobs and force trading partners to offer more favorable terms. The reality, however, proved far more complex and damaging. Trump's trade wars, far from bringing back jobs and boosting American manufacturing, instead ignited a global trade war that disrupted supply chains, increased costs for businesses and consumers, and fueled economic uncertainty. One of Trump's most consequential moves was the imposition of massive tariffs on Chinese goods. These tariffs, ranging from 25% to 30%, targeted a vast array of products, from electronics and machinery to clothing and agricultural products. The aim, according to Trump, was to punish China for what he perceived as unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. However, the tariffs backfired spectacularly. Instead of forcing China to concede, they ignited a tit-for-tat trade war, with China retaliating with its own tariffs on American goods. This trade war, far from benefiting American businesses, ended up hurting them, as they faced higher costs for imported components and materials. Trump's protectionist instincts extended beyond China. He also targeted the European Union, imposing tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. This move, ostensibly aimed at protecting American steel and aluminum producers, had the unintended consequence of alienating key allies and disrupting global supply chains. The tariffs on EU metals, far from bolstering American industry, ended up raising costs for American manufacturers that relied on imported steel and aluminum. This, in turn, led to higher prices for consumers, who ultimately bore the brunt of Trump's trade wars. Even some within Trump's own administration, including his economic advisor Larry Kudlow and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, reportedly expressed reservations about the wisdom of these aggressive trade policies. These tariffs, while intended to protect American industries, ultimately acted as a drag on the global economy. They disrupted established supply chains, forcing companies to scramble for alternative sources of materials and components, often at higher costs. This, in turn, led to increased prices for consumers, dampening demand, and further slowing economic growth. The trade wars also injected a significant degree of uncertainty into the global economy, as businesses and investors grappled with the unpredictable nature of Trump's policies and the potential for further escalation. This uncertainty, coupled with the very real economic damage inflicted by the tariffs, created a toxic brew that poisoned the well of global economic confidence. As the economic turmoil spread, countries around the world began to feel the ripple effects. From Europe to Asia, no region was left untouched. Economies that once seemed stable were now facing unprecedented challenges. And well, the global market was in a state of chaos. Many experts have debated whether this crisis could have been averted. Some argue that early intervention and more stringent regulations might have made a difference. Others believe that the interconnected nature of the global economy made such a collapse inevitable. Looking ahead, the future remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. Lessons must be learned to prevent a repeat of this economic disaster.